Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. I'm very excited to introduce Tree Lind as our guest on today's episode. Tree is a sculpture professor and artist who uses cast metal, fabricated metal, and mixed media in her artistic practice. Tree, thank you so much for letting me interview you for the show. Before this conversation, I had no idea what your iron background was. I'm so glad to have learned where your journey has taken you up until this point, because not only was it wildly entertaining, it has taught me that being open to a good challenge will sometimes result in life-changing opportunities. The podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who's joined as a Patreon member and helps me afford the production costs of this show. This episode is brought to you by our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. For more information about the Sloss Metal Arts program, please visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. And I just want to take a quick moment to give them a little extra thanks. I think that Sloss and Sloss Metal Arts hosting the national conference has been mentioned in every single episode of the show so far. And that is evidence of the positive impact Sloss Metal Arts has on our iron casting community. I personally can't wait to get back there this coming spring. The conference dates are already set and they're April 5th through the 8th in 2023. So get it on your calendar and I can't wait to see you there. Now, for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in and please enjoy. Tree Lind, welcome so much to the podcast Iron. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so nice to meet you.
I'm really excited to meet you too. So this is actually a milestone episode for me because you are officially the first person that I'm interviewing that I've never actually met before. So it's a little nerve-wracking because I don't have a rapport with you, but I think we're just from like talking before we started recording, I think we're going to get along just fine.
I think so. And I'm honored.
So your former student reached out to me, John, what was his name? John Paulus, and recommended that I contact you and interview you. But then I was just interviewing Alyssa Toninato this past weekend. And she said, because she saw your name on the schedule, she was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're interviewing Tree." And so that was like another kind of like another layer of vetting. Like if you're good with Alyssa, I think you're going to be good with me, sort of a thing. And so I felt like, okay, so let me finally, sorry, it's taken me this long to get to our very first question, which is, well, Tree, who the hell are you anyways?
Well, I'm Tree, short for Teresa Lind. I'm from Wisconsin, born and raised just a Wisconsinite through and through. And I've always really loved, art. I started out drawing. I had a major in drawing and painting until I saw a bronze pour, and then I was seduced by metal, and there was no turning back after that. But yeah, I love to. And my studio's in Chilton, Wisconsin. I love gardening, although I just help my mom garden now because she has a gigantic, like 1 acre garden, and I gave up on mine because I would just let it get too weedy. I still love comic books. I am married to Garrett Kruger, who I met at an iron pour. I love dogs. I don't know what else to say.
That's good. That's great. That gives me an idea as somebody that's never met you before. That gives me an idea of kind of like where you're coming from. So you've already established that you love pouring metal. And so we're going to talk about iron today, but I want to start off kind of like with your formidable years, just any early introductions that you had to art, or maybe any tools, or like working, or you said you're working maybe gardening with your mom. So it's like anything that you think could have influenced your love of iron and casting?
When I was a little girl, when I was real little, I used to go to church, and I would sit in church and draw dresses. I thought I was going to be a fashion designer. And, little did I know I would be designing iron dresses in my adult years. Um, but I had like this school days book that my mom got for me when I was little, and I'd fill out, like what I wanted to be in first grade, and then second grade and third grade. And there was always like artist appeared several times in there. Um, Mom, which I never got to be, um, and teacher, which that happened too. So, but when I was 13, um, my mom got remarried to a farmer in Chilton, Wisconsin, and so I was 13. I was a 13-year-old girl, and I was difficult, and my stepdad was difficult, and we didn't get along very well. But he pushed me all the time. He challenged me, and and he would make me come out and like learn to change my oil and learn to like learn to change a tire. So I really was always trying to prove myself to him. So I got this I don't know, drive for working really hard from the time I was a teenager. And so, whether it was like unloading a wagon of hay, feeding the cows every night. I had to go out and feed all the cows. I didn't have to do morning chores. I'm not a morning person, so that was good. But I learned about things like, how to use leverage when when you're not a big person, or just, you have a bolt that, even as a big farmer like my stepdad was, you couldn't get it loose, so he'd call me over and be like, all right, listen, I can't get this bolt off. So when this happens, you take your wrench and you put it on there, and then you take a long pipe and you go way out here and you pull,
cheater bar.
He showed me. So I'm like, 14, 15. And I'm like, okay, all right. And of course I was leaving going, I don't know why he shows me stuff like that. It's so stupid, But, like later on, like all these things, like, using leverage and using, just like physics so much, in my, professional art career. And when I tell you we didn't, he and I didn't get along, like we didn't get along, like we like fought and yelled at each other. And, it was tough. And my poor mom, she just tried to be, like the peacekeeper.
Yeah.
I did have a younger sister and a younger brother. And I have an older brother too, but he never lived out on the farm with us. But I did learn a strong work ethic. And I think I learned, I was already really bullheaded, but I think I learned even more stubbornness when I got challenged like that all the time. He's like, he would always say things like, oh, you think you can do this? You think you can do this as good as I can do? And I'd be like, I'd have to go and like, be like, I'm going to fix this thing, and I'd go and try to like fix the cow, what was it? Barn cleaner, like the thing that pulled the manure out of the barn.
I don't even know what you could tell me anything. And but yeah, I mean, I think that in formidable years, those skills, I also was a female 13-year-old, and it's easy to want to push back. I feel like, because I don't know, like I went through a lot of angst, and this interview isn't about me, it's about you, but I can relate to what you're talking about with, kind of like mowing the lawn, or maybe just like digging a hole with my dad, or like shoveling snow. Like, you have a snowblower. Why can't you just snow blow the walk? And it's like, well, because that is a different, like learning these things that, if you weren't introduced to them, it's a lot of catch up. It's a lot of catch up in later years, and people do it. And obviously we know plenty of people that are just fine. But I find that a lot of people that love iron casting had some sort of a early teachings in these types of skills, in these like real world application manual You're working with your hands, knowing how to use a wrench, knowing how to, I mean, that's amazing. Learning a cheater bar. Like, even though you may have been really fighting against him, he was trying to set you up. Like, all these years back, we can at least look back and say he was
Yeah.
trying to set you up for success.
Yeah, and he's gone now, and I have so much to thank him for, and he knows it. Like, we became best buddies. At the end of his life, I'd be like, he couldn't get out anymore, like drive, but I'd wheel his wheelchair down the ramp and be like, you want to go get some 3,000 pounds of sand with me?
Yeah.
I got the hooked up, and he'd be like, all right, let's go. And then he'd tell me everything that was in the news. And, I mean, like, I spent a lot of time with him. Like, in the end, we were pretty good buds. And then he'd always come out to the iron floors up, because it was his farm. He'd always come there and talk to everybody and like say the most embarrassing things.
That's really beautiful that your relationship with him was able to come full circle, and that you can now, and that you had the chance to show him all the things that he taught you and how much you did appreciate them. And he got to experience iron pours. That's great.
Yeah. And the funniest thing was that my mom was always so worried when I decided to be an art major in college. She was always like, I mean, he told me this later, your mom was always saying, what is she going to do with an art degree? What is she going to do with that? And my stepdad would tell her, don't worry about her. She can do anything. And like, he didn't tell me this until much later. And I was just like, wow. I had no idea. He had so much respect for me. He was always challenging me so much. I was always trying to prove myself. And it's just really cool that, like, he let me know that he recognized this in me.
Yeah, that is really cool. These people that help us along the way. And even if we're fighting them. Yeah. Because they see something in us that we don't even know yet. That's how I kind of look at it. So then were you also artistically inclined, like in elementary school, middle school? What was going on?
Yeah. Always art was my favorite class, So when I got to high school and I started thinking about what I was going to be when I grew up and what I was going to do in college, I never had any other answer than I want to go to school for art. Like, I just couldn't think of any other thing that I would possibly ever want to, devote my life to. So that was it. I had a great high school art teacher. I loved drawing and painting. Painting was my first love. I love oil painting, and I haven't done it in 20 years or more.
That's okay.
But that's what I decided, I was going to go to school for.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my major in undergrad until year 4, when I had to take a sculpture class and I didn't want to. And I just was like, oh, okay, I'll get this over with.
All right. And so then what happened?
Then TC Farley was my undergrad professor, and he was a magical human. Julia Schmidt was actually his teacher. He had gone to Cranbrook, so I'm a second generation.
Wow.
But yeah, he would talk about Julia Schmidt, and he gave us the recipe for Schmidt wax, which is a oil-based clay. So it's 22 pounds of
oil. Is it a secret? Is it? It's like,
no, it's not.
Okay. Wait, not on my podcast. Like, they'll come for me. Okay.
No.
Okay. For Schmidt wax. No. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Schmidt wax. Yeah. So it's 22 pounds of 0.4 clay, 10 pounds of microcrystalline wax, 5.5 pounds of motor oil, pounds, not quarts, and 14 ounces of lithium grease. And so, yeah, you melt it all, and then you mix in the clay and dump it on a garbage bag, spread it out. And it's getting passed down from generation to generation.
And what is the like pliability and moldability? What makes it so special?
Well, it's a homemade oil-based clay, so it just doesn't dry out. It's like
plastiline?
Yeah, like plastiline.
But yeah. Is it softer? Is it more?
You can make it whatever you want. And you can also make it safe for kids. I always give my art educators the recipe, trading out lithium grease for Vaseline and trading out motor oil for baby oil or mineral oil. And you can use cheese wax. I mean, you can use, 1,4 clay is hard to get. I've made it with other dry clays, but yeah. So like that's
amazing. And it's also amazing to me that you have that memorized. Like, you just rattled it off.
I used to carry a little like recipe card in my purse for years, and it might even still be in there, but yeah, I always had it. But yeah, so TC Farley was my undergrad professor, and he was like, he had this mustache. He would twitch his mustache and like, and like pull his hair straight up, so yeah, like
when he was talking to you.
Yeah, and he would just pull his hair straight up and be like, just come in and be like, we have things to talk about today, and I was just like, who is this crazy man? And he gave us our first assignment was he gave us 1 pound of microcrystalline wax, and he said, or maybe it was 2. I think it was 2 pounds of microcrystalline wax. Okay. He said, here's your material. Make a figure that uses this whole piece of wax. And here's your model. And he put a model up on the table in the middle of the room and put spotlights on her. And
so like a living model.
Yeah.
Like okay.
Yeah. And I loved figure drawing. So all of a sudden I was really shy, and I was like kind of in my spot doing my, like making my little sculpture, and then I was like, I don't know what's going on the other side. I can't do this all from one perspective. And I was like, so I was running around on the outside, and I would like pop up and peek through some students, and then be like, and then run around again and pop up and peek through some students, and like, this is going on in the back, So I was super shy, and I was just like, but I have to see this. I have to do this. I was like, my heart was beating, and I was breathing heavy, and I was like, oh my gosh, And that was like day 2 of sculpture, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on with me? And then,
was it pressure? Was it feeling pressure, or was it excitement?
It was excitement.
Okay.
Yeah. And then like, we didn't get to cast metal in sculpture 1. But I saw the advanced sculptors doing a bronze pour one day. And I was like, what is that? What is that? I have to do that. Yeah, you do it in sculpture 2. I was like, I got to take sculpture 2. So then I was like, oh my gosh. So this was like 1997. And yeah, so I was just like, there was no turning back. Once I saw that, I was just hooked. And my first casting was that little figure, that little like 1 pound or 2 pounds of wax.
That same one.
Yep, I saved it from sculpture 1, and that was my first bronze casting.
Was it an investment mold?
No, it was ceramic shell. We were lucky enough at UW Oshkosh to have ceramic shell, because my professor was a foundry guy, so yeah. I was really lucky. Yeah.
And shell, I feel like, so when I was at grad school, we didn't have shell. It was just sand molds. And then we did investment for bronze and aluminum, but we also did the sand molds for bronze and aluminum. But it was just, my professor, the way he put it was, it's just so much to keep up the slurry in an academic setting that he just didn't want to bother with it. So the fact that so many schools do have it's like a really big gift to the students, I think. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And we didn't have sand. I didn't do sand until I was in grad school. And only because I was like, well, I guess I should probably do this once,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was something that I was learning with my students when I started teaching. Most of it.
I mean, as we grow and teach more, I think we become more comfortable with learning along with our students, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So you're in undergrad, and you took sculpture 1 and sculpture 2, and then and already had fallen in love with casting. Did you do iron in undergrad?
I did. So I added sculpture as a major, and so I had a triple emphasis in my art degree. So but my professor, TC Farley, he said, there's going to be an iron pour down in Whitewater. You guys haven't done an iron pour. We don't do those here. So you guys should go down to UW Whitewater and work with Dan McGuire. Just tell him TC sent you, And so I went down with 3 of my friends. I think 2, we drove 2 in each car, and we took our little shell molds down, and like, don't make anything too complicated. Iron's brittle, and we're just like, totally like, I don't know what's going on. We just brought, borrowed gear from UW Oshkosh, and showed up, and Dan was like, all right, here's what you're going to do. And so that was 1998, I think. So that was my first iron pour, we just went down, like 4 really dedicated sculpture students went down and worked on the cupola. And at that time, there was a lot of keeping the slag hole clear. And that was my job the whole time. I was like 21, 20, 21, something like that. And I was little. And I was just like, like I had like the slag stick, and I was just the whole time like, like trying to keep the slag hole, because it was like this big. It was a little tiny slag hole. And and Dan was really experimental. Like he is a mad scientist. Like he helped invent 3D printing of ceramic shells. Like he is amazing, so like I ended up teaching at UW Whitewater because he was on a research leave developing technology for casting. So I was really lucky.
So they 3D print the ceramic shell like through a
3D printer. They print the shell, and then it's hollow inside. There's no burning out or anything.
Oh, wow.
So they just print it with like a thick ceramic shell that's just like one layer, and it's amazing.
That is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Just to think about, because I know that they've been like 3D printing like kind of metal things, and that's like a whole other world that I'm very interested in, but I have no I have no personal connection to it besides like friends that do it, but so I haven't heard of that yet.
Doing things like he was like, stick your hand in this stuff, and like it would warm up around your hand, like some weird pebbly stuff he was using. And I was just like, whoa, because it would force the ceramic shell to cure really quick. And it was really neat. But yeah, 1998, 1999, I think, because I went 2 times to UW Whitewater, and I was just like, we came back and we were like, that was crazy, the whole class, like, like this was the most awesome thing. We got to like pour the metal, and we had to walk with it over, because at UW Oshkosh, we had a hoist, we had a number 100 crucible. So we had a hoist, and we had, all the gear on, and TC made it really like ceremonial. He would do this whole kind of like prayer, like over the hot metal. Well, and we only poured bronze, and we only did a ceramic shell. So he'd do this whole, like, what I'm pulling off the top here is called it's the impurities that have floated to the top of the metal. We call it the dregs of hell and the sins of our forefathers. And the whole class would go, of which there are many.
Wow.
So, I know. I was like, this is so cool.
This is so cool. And that's amazing.
He would always do these like really like ceremonial things like that. Yeah. And he was taking a medical leave, and I ended up, after grad school, teaching for him at UW Oshkosh. I ended up staying there 5 years, but I like shared some students with him. So it was really interesting to have had him as a professor and then be teaching the students that he was just teaching, It's amazing, and big shoes to fill. It was intimidating. But I got, just amazing students from that time.
So you come back from the first iron pour where you were on the slagger, and then so then you did a second one. So what types of things were you casting what was the mold that you remember?
Yeah, it was a little TC had told us to do just do a little, the least complicated thing. And so I did this little figure with like a little swirly thing, a little thin swirly thing. And of course I broke it when I was breaking off the shell, and, they were laughing at me because they're like, didn't he tell you not to do something that was that, that detailed and fine? And I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't understand,
Yeah. There's a lot, I feel like, with iron and iron casting, that it's like trial by fire. You have to learn your mistakes for yourself, because you learn them twice as well, and also you learn the parameters of the material,
Yes.
And the limitations. And so then, was that what you focused on in grad school? Were you like, I'm going to go to, so go on.
I needed to get a job that was, I graduated from undergrad, and since my mom had been like, asking, what I could do with a art degree, I was like,
Yeah.
well, I got to find a job because I have to prove to her I can get a job with an art degree, So
Yeah.
I applied for some jobs and I got two opportunities. One was in Florida doing some um, like cast fiberglass stuff for like theme parks, and the other one was doing prosthetics, sculpting prosthetics in Mississippi. So I went for the Mississippi job, and I I was there for 18 months, I think. And while I was there, I was like, well, I want to go to grad school. Um, and I'm getting this really interesting experience. I'm learning how to make these like really amazing prosthetics, and learning different, technologies and everything. And so I started looking at grad schools, and then I kind of happened upon the Florence Academy of Art, and I just was like kind of dreamily looking at the website and like, oh, look at this, how amazing. And
Tell
it's
me what that is, because I tell me what the Floristic Academy of the Arts is.
Florence, Italy.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I thought that might have been it, but I was like, tell me more. I was trying to not give away the fact that I'd never heard of it before.
Oh, that's okay. It's academic art. So it's like really learning like how to, because I was a figurative artist. So I really wanted to learn how to draw and sculpt the figure like in a really academic way. So I would just know it. I would know it so well. Well, I didn't go through the whole thing, but I did look at their tuition, and I thought it's going to be outrageous, but I'm going to look anyway. But it was only $3,000 for a trimester, and I was like, what's my credit card limit? So I put it on my credit card, and I got accepted, and I went, and I was drawing and sculpting the whole time, and it was amazing. And when I came back, like I had applied for graduate school during that time too, before I left for Italy, and I think I pushed off graduate school for 1 year so that I could do this, thing in Italy, which was only 3 months, but it would kind of spanned both semesters.
Mm-hmm.
So I just worked, and then I went to Italy and did this little moment there, and then I came back and I got into grad school at UW Milwaukee with Chuck Kraus, and I was really excited about all these things that I learned in Italy and how to sculpt academically. So I asked if I could teach like a little weekend class for academic sculpture, figure sculpture.
Uh-huh.
And I got to do that. It was just like a workshop that I did on my own with the use of the studio. And lo and behold, some women from UW Whitewater came up because they wanted to do some academic sculpting and work from the model. And so they worked with me during that workshop, and they're like, oh, yeah, Dan's still pouring iron. Dan's, and of course Chuck knew Dan, and so there were iron pours, like I think he did them annually, like once a year.
Okay.
So there were a couple that I missed and a couple that I went to. I was getting invited by a friend of mine who was an undergraduate that time at UW Milwaukee to go to Down on the Farm pour, and I was like, what? I don't know anyone there. I don't really do iron. I don't think I should go to that. So I was like, but I had heard it was like the second or third annual, and I was just like, I don't think I want to go to Iowa and pour iron. I don't know what I'm doing. So I missed out on those. But like much later, I was like, oh my gosh, that was that pour that I should have totally gone to. It took me a long time to finally get to Kelly's.
I mean, sometimes it's hard to go when you feel like you don't know anybody. I've gone to a couple or I've missed a couple because, well, actually, that's like, I confess to Alyssa that, I've been wanting to go up to her February pours that she has, the pouring your heart out for years. And there was 1 year that I was really serious, and I looked at the dates and I mapped out on Google Maps, like where I would drive and stuff. But then it was I had only met her maybe like once. So I didn't really feel like I had any, it's scary because like, where are you going to stay? And it just seems, that's the thing that I feel like once we get into a rhythm of, okay, so I always go, like a lot of times I go to the Metal Museum in Memphis, but it's like, I know the people, I know the route, I know like it even comes down to like the rest stops and like where I go to the like, but also I know where I'm going to stay. I have people that can help me if I get in trouble. And just going up to the pouring your heart out, I felt like too intimidated. And so maybe that's like a lesson to all of us is to just, I should have just sent her an email, back then. I
I
should have.
know. I know. And she would have been like, yeah, come on.
I know. But so you didn't get to Kelly's until much later, but what were you doing when you were in grad school?
So I was still casting a lot of bronze. I still love bronze, but I finally was like, well, they're making sand molds here, and I've never made a sand mold, so I probably should try a sand mold. And I got to use this Muller thing, and I got to clean this. This is really annoying, you know. So I made this big, giant piece with a core in it. I think it was that when I was in grad school that I made this big piece, I was like, I brought it down there and the core broke, and I ended up having to like put threaded rod through it to like hold it to the outside, and they were pouring it because I was going to give it. I was like, it's a loss, and they were like, no, we're going to try to pour it. So I put threaded rod through the core and held it like it took the top off completely and just like suspended it on the
Okay.
on the bottom half, the drain. And so they just poured iron into the side of it, and that piece turned out amazing. I love it to this day. It was so much better as a miscast kind of.
Huh.
I mean, it still cast like it looked like the piece I made, but it had like all this stuff sticking out of it and weird, like seam line. It was so much more interesting than the sculpture that I made. And so I was kind of like, oh, that was kind of crazy. I don't know about this. I think I'll stick with my ceramic shell and bronze, and then, so I did my thesis show and I graduated, and then TC Farley needed to go on a medical leave of absence, and he asked me to teach for him since I had just graduated if I'd take his place. And, that was 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated in 2005 with my MFA. And so in 2007, I was, TC had asked me to step in for him. And then he didn't come back. He was like, no, you can just stay there. And so I was there for 5 years.
Wow.
And I was like, this is like this iron casting thing. I don't know anything about it, but I think it's really important that my students do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I guess I got to figure out what's going on. And so we
carry the torch.
Right. Yeah. And we still just had ceramic shell, but I was like, TC, he told us about this when I was an undergrad. So I'm going to tell my students about this and, send them down to Whitewater, UW Whitewater to go cast metal. And so I went down with them, and Kelly Gierach and Amanda Beard, like they were just crazy. They were like, they had the ladle all the time, and they were just these two young women who were just like, they were so pumped after that. They're like, when's the next one? And I was like, oh crap, what did I get myself into? So we had to go to every iron pour, and then I was like, all right, well, Sloss is coming up. I heard about that, like I gotta go do that. So I went, and my first Sloss was, I think, 2007.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it must have been. I don't know how that works out, but 2000, it had to be.
Yeah, it's odd years for sure. Yeah.
So I must have started teaching in the spring, or in the spring semester. Yeah, I must have, because I'm certain that I went in 2007. So I had students down with me, and they were super excited. And I was like, I don't know what we're in for, but they got on teams. They were so excited. They got on people's teams. They introduced themselves all over the place, and it was just so much fun. And they had a blast, and I was like, whew, got through that one.
Did you all camp on site? Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And, gosh, I barely remember that one, but I know, like, I think I brought like 8 students or something down with me. So when we went when we went again in 2009, there was like, um, I kind of heard a thing going around like, oh, Teresa's here. She brings all those women from Wisconsin. And I was like, what? I was like, oh yeah, I guess I do. Because when I started teaching after TC left, I had almost no guys taking the class. Like they all like, except John Paulus, and like a few others, like it was almost all young women taking the sculpture class. And I was like, well, this is a welder. This is the foundry. You guys already know a little bit about this because you had TC. We're going to try doing this on our own. And they just killed it. And so, yeah, I was always bringing this whole group of women to iron pours. And it was a little bit weird at the time. I mean, there was plenty of women already there, but not like all together. There's like two from this school and one from that school. And, and so like, here I am with like 10 women coming in, and it was great. And I realized like that made me really happy to be, to like introduce all those girls to that whole situation.
Yeah.
And they were welcomed with open arms. I mean, everybody was amazing. So,
yeah.
And then I think in 2008 and 2010, we went to the Indianapolis Iron Symposium at the Indianapolis Art Center.
Oh, I don't know anything about this. Tell me.
So it only happened for a couple of years. I think Bernie Carreno did that. He was the director there or something, some pull, because he got this whole iron symposium set up there. And so there was like just, I don't know, 10, 12 cupolas in the parking lot, kind of like.
There was just 10, 12 cupolas. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Like an aisle of cupolas. And so that was 2008. And I was like, well, I was just barely staying ahead of my students, trying to like, teach them iron stuff, so I was like, well, I guess I better learn to build a cupola and see how this thing runs. So I signed up for Danny Matheson's cupola building class in Minneapolis. And so I learned how to build a cupola from Danny. And then in 2009 we went back to Sloss, and then in 2010 we went back to the Indianapolis Iron Symposium. And it was amazing. I mean, it was all the same group of women, adding a couple every time we went out to one of these things. And that year, so I finally was starting to like make things in iron. I was like, well, this is a really interesting medium, and it speaks differently than bronze. And I was starting to realize like bronze kind of has a lot of baggage, like it has so much history, and it has so much like, you got to make this, like there's a lot of pressure, it's like oil paints, it's got to be precious, so I was kind of like, this is gritty. This is so much more my personality, like that was the first time. So in 2010, there was like a competition for a solo show at the Indianapolis Art Center.
Okay.
And so I was like, I think I'll do this. And I was like, God, I got to join as a professional, like, who am I? I've only been teaching for 4 years of just, I'm like, 32 maybe. But, I was just like, I'm going up against people that I'd heard about from Chuck, like Ken Payne and Bernie Carreno, and all these guys are in the professional level league. And I was like, I don't know. I'll just throw my hat in the ring and I'll just leave. So that was the first time I made a life-size piece, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I just had I had a torso made. I cast it solid. It was a half life-size torso, so it was like, I don't know, 20 inches tall, and it was solid.
I was going to say it was heavy.
Oh my gosh. I had since learned not to cast something like that solid. It was ridiculous. I had a couple of those before I learned that, though. I was like, what the heck?
But like we've already covered, lessons learned for yourself.
Yes.
You learn twice as well.
Yes. And so, as the teacher, I'm like, don't do this. So we had to make the piece, like we had to make the mold there. So I was I was in a mold making workshop at that, in 2010. And so I made this sand mold, which I was still not that familiar with because we didn't have that at UW Oshkosh. We were still doing all shell. So I had to kind of learn that. And so I cast this torso, and then I welded some rebar onto it somehow. I don't even know how I welded this stupid solid piece of iron, but I'm sure it wasn't welded very well. And then I just had thrown some like tires, it's like tire inner tubes in the back of my truck, and was like, I don't know, I'll just do something with that. I was thinking like some kind of dress thing. So I made it like my height, but it was like half life-size torso. So really long skirts, and then the skirt is kind of like where the concept is. And so I made this this iron sculpture that had a rubber dress, and she was kind of pretty. And I was like, oh, I really like this. I like this gritty material and this pretty dress,
Yeah.
So like it just kind of it all like just went from there. Like it just grew and snowballed. And I found all sorts of like appropriate like uses for iron in that sense, because they're so like, I really liked these gritty ladies, and it reminded me of my students, and my work really was inspired by my students quite a lot, because they were so like, if they went out at night, like you'd never know what they were doing during the day. You'd never know that they were like in the foundry and welding and casting, and like they go out and be all beautiful and like, and I loved like that juxtaposition of these little like ladies and like they're just total grittiness, and then they're like just graceful, like
there's a duality.
Other classes, yeah, it was so neat to see, and see them grow and develop like that. And I wanted my sculptures to read that way.
Yeah, and I think they do. From what I've seen on your website, I think that they do. And I feel like you also do as well. And I relate to that, because I have just like a normal day job where I go around and people look at me and I don't know, judge me in a certain way, or maybe put me in a certain category. And then I don't talk about it often, unless like it doesn't come up often, but when it does, and they're like, wait, you cast iron? You know how to weld? And then they go, can you make me a sword? And I'm like, this conversation is over. But that moment where I get to say like, yes, I look like this now, but on the weekends I shape shift into blackface, welding cap, grinding dust in my ears, but I still feel beautiful. And maybe I feel even more beautiful with that type of self-expression and working on my artwork. So that's really interesting that you channeled those inspirations into your artwork.
Yeah, I think my students are inspiring. They inspire me, and I learn so much from them. And I'm just in awe of them all the time. That's what I really learned. Like, I'm just like, wow, these are amazing young women, and like, and I still don't have very many guys in my classes still, like, they come and go, and occasionally I'll get a sculpture major. That's a guy, but like, I mean, I don't know if you know Ariana Berman, but
yes, I do very well.
She was one of my students, and like she put like everyone to shame. I mean, she is amazing, and I was just like, I'm in awe of her, and I'm just like, oh, I got to go make more sculpture because I'm so inspired, because she's amazing,
Yeah, she is. And she's killing it right now. She's at Trails right now. Right.
Yeah.
But I met her, gosh, in Memphis. And it's very interesting. So I am very East Coast heavy and was very Southeast heavy, because that's where I went to grad school. And that's where like the iron family took me in, and so Birmingham, I was, I knew a lot of people from, Florida and all of those, like Mississippi, all of those, but these these people in the community that are coming from, ironically, from the New England area or the Northeast, just because I didn't go to grad school there. I haven't met a lot of them. I mean, I have a little bit more now as the years go by, but yeah, anybody from kind of like the mid north states, like complete, maybe we've crossed paths at SLOS, because SLOS and the national conference there is such a kind of mecca and like academic mecca for iron casting. But so I had, yeah, met her and was just blown away. And then that SLOS had, was in the student cupola competition.
Oh my gosh. She's amazing.
Rocked it.
Yeah.
Was that 2017? I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was 2017 or 2019. I think it was 2017.
Yeah, I think so. Cause it was cause I just remember like watching her, and she's like, I hope that she's not offended when I say she's so little, but so powerful. And so that is just very inspiring, because it just shows you human capability. If you put your mind to it, you really can do anything. And so she's at Trails. I think now I'm going to go to the fire night that they have at the end of this month. And so, when your episode comes out, it'll probably will be in August. So I'll have already seen her, but yeah,
maybe I'll see you there.
Oh, really? Are you going to be?
Maybe I'm taking July off and just kind of doing whatever comes, like I got really tired, like this past year, I got really tired. And so like, I'm just exhausted. Like my body just is having a hard time handling this anymore. And so I'm not committing to anything in July, but I'm letting things like, that I want to do and that I feel like I have energy for, I'm going to go do. So that's definitely on my calendar of like, maybe I'll do this.
Yeah, maybe. Because I will be completely honest with, so I'm in the St. Louis area, just a few hours away. Like, I think it'll probably take me 2 hours to drive there, but there's a time change. So it's because they're right over the,
that always,
whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and so I'll be like, yeah, it'll only take me 2 hours to get there. But then when I get there, it seems like it's been 3 hours. Like, I'm like, you guys are already in bed. Like, no. But I actually have a previous engagement the night before. So I'm a preparator. And so I have to set up an exhibition, and the exhibition is opening like that Friday, the day before. I can't get out of it. And so I'll be driving in early. But that would be really cool if I got to meet you. I mean, so I'll actually have met, if you do come, which I get that. I think that everybody has in the past year gone through a different like levels of exhaustion. I definitely can relate to that. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if there's something in the water or like recovering from a plague. I
blame a lot of it on that. I was, listening to something about like how you over exaggerate your body language, trying to connect with your students, like when you're trying to teach remotely. And so it's more exhausting to try to teach because they're not responding because you don't see their body language. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like overdoing it. And then like after 2 hours of that, then you take like a 10-minute break and then you do it for 2 hours again. And
oh my gosh.
It's like, and I think right after we got back in person, I was like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Like a lot of people are so tired. I'm not. And now I am. Mm-hmm. So I don't know either, but
it's interesting to track though, how it ebbs and flows. And I'll be interested in 5 years. Like look at 5 years from now, because we will all survive. We will all make it another 5 years, but to look back and think, or just even have the scientists say, and then the whole community went through a depression, it's just going to be really interesting to see how everything shakes out. And like, there are a lot of silver linings, and then there are a lot of things that are just a devastating shame. And it's just trying to I just try to keep the balance in my head of like where everything is and keep your chin up sort of. But it has been exceptionally difficult and strange recently. So So do you feel like, did we get to where you are now all the way?
Oh,
I can't tell.
oh, okay. So sorry. Yeah. So let's see. So in 2011,
Oh yeah. So that was like one thing that I was wondering what happened with the competition, but does that bring us back to?
yeah. So that was, I think, was that 2008 or 2010? I think it was, I don't know, 2008 or 2010, because
Okay.
Indianapolis was on even years for the 2 or 3 years that it ran.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, I actually won, and I was like, I know, I was
Cause you kind of breezed
scared.
over,
I
you
was
breezed
scared.
over it. And I
I guess
didn't
I didn't
know if
want to say it.
I didn't know if it was because sometimes failures can also be what triggers our greatest success, you know? And so I didn't know if maybe that was just part of the story, that the competition triggered you to make a new body of work that was like outside of your, but you won.
I did,
Okay, I'm
and
glad I
yes,
asked. I'm
it
glad
did.
I circled back.
It did trigger me to make a new body of work. But I was actually really scared of all those guys who are so, wonderful and gentle, but like
Prolific and
and, like Carl Billingsley was there, and Ken Payne and Bernie Carreno, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go crawl under a rock. I don't, but they all congratulated me. They were all so wonderful, and
of
I was just like,
course.
what the heck? I feel so crazy. But yeah, so then I was inspired to make a whole series of like dresses that represented like women in traditionally male dominated occupations. So like
Oh.
I made a lumberjill, and these were all like 4 feet tall, and then they were on 2 foot pedestals, and they were all outside. So I made a lumberjill with like a wooden dress, and I made a huntress with a leather dress, and I made a farmer with a dress of art farm implements. I made a
Mhm.
mason with a cement dress, so, and they're all these women who are like, they stand like this, and they're like it's easy, like they're proud, and they're like overcoming, and just like my students.
Yeah.
So that's what it kind of like gave me the direction and drive to do that series. And that was really fun. And like my mom came, and I think she came with me to take it down, actually, which was kind of neat. It was shortly after my stepdad had passed away, and
Mm.
because he had passed away in 2010.
Mm.
um no, it's 2015. So it was a long time after that, because Bernie left the Indianapolis Arts Center.
Okay.
And so like they like came back around and were like, hey, we want to honor this thing, like this competition. It took years, actually. So I think it
Oh,
was like 2014 that I went and set it up, and then like
okay.
2015 I went and took down, um
Mhm.
or something like that. I don't remember, but it was shortly after my stepdad had passed away, which was 2015. And my mom came with me, and so that was pretty special.
Yeah.
um but let's see, so 2012 I actually, UW Oshkosh put up the job for uh tenure track professor for sculpture that I was filling in for, and I applied, and um didn't even get interviewed. So I was very, very devastated. And
Understandably.
yeah. um so I went and worked a corporate job for a little while, and then Dan McGuire called me and said, "Hey, will you apply for my position? I want to take a research leave. I'm developing this ceramic shell that can be 3D printed." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. I mean, sure. Like Whitewater. I'm in Neenah. Whitewater's a long way, but yeah, whatever. I like to drive. It's 2 hours."
Uh,
so so I was supposed to be there for one semester, and it's 10 years later, and I'm still there.
so at first you were commuting?
Yeah, yeah. And then yeah, and I moved down there, and then I moved back up here, and then I moved down there again, and then I moved back up here. I was just, I couldn't get settled. I was, I still only get 1 year contracts, so I never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but at this point, they just did a $3 million renovation on the sculpture studio. And we're going to get an induction furnace. So that's
Oh,
really exciting
wow.
that they're actually putting money into the foundry. So yay, state of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so from 2012 on, Dan McGuire had been doing iron pours at UW Whitewater every year. And so I was like, okay, I got to do these. I got to host these things now. Okay. I don't know what is what I'm doing, but, let's see, 2009, I think it was. So it was a few years before Kate Sanderib, said, Tree, we should build a furnace for Sloss. We should get in on on bringing our furnace to Sloss.
Yeah.
So we actually did that. We built RV, also known as Lilith, because she was kind of a jerk. The cupola.
I knew what you were talking
Yeah.
about, but can you tell me the connection with the name?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Is that related to her name was Lilith and she was kind of a jerk?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But what is that? Is it from mythology that I just don't know?
Yeah, I think it's she was I think she was like oh gosh, now I don't remember. Was she the biblical, like harlot that
okay.
Genesis or something? I can't remember.
Well, now it's been so long. I have moments like this too, where I'm like, wow, that was really important to me at one time, 15 years ago.
She was wicked, like a wicked lady. So, but yeah, that's
and appropriately named. Okay.
Yes. Because so that's the name that Kate gave to her. But Nick Nabel, who did a lot of ours and a lot of Alyssa Tornado's videos, he was videotaping this whole thing. And that was like, so that was the second furnace I had built. I was like, well, I just built that little bitty furnace with Dan Matheson and it didn't even have a wind box. And, I was like, so we built it in 2 days. So I don't really know what I'm doing. So Kate Sanderib and her students, and then Gregory Brula and me. So Greg and I were on one kind of team, and Kate and her students were, and we kind of brought everything together. So she built most of like the cupola, and Greg and I built like the bottom stand and some tools and stuff. And so then we brought it together, and then trying to run that thing, we just had the hardest time finding the right size blower. And I think it was a 19-inch ID.
Wow.
Yeah, she was big. But we were getting sludgy iron all the time, and we had Dan McGuire come out and look at it, and he kind of helped us, and he's like, raise your slag hole and kind of do this stuff. And so when we finally got hot iron out of it, we had been working on it for so many months, and we were like, Sloss is coming up, we got to get this thing working. And Nick Nabel comes up with his camera, and he's like, well, she was a reluctant virgin, but when she finally put out, she sure did. And I was just like, so we called her RV for reluctant virgin.
Oh, okay.
It's naughty. But then Kate was like,
but appropriate.
We should call her Lilith.
Yeah.
So we got her to Sloss in 2009, and she ran like a dream. Like we threw a brake router in at the end just to make sure, and there was nothing when it,
wow.
Bottom. So we were so proud.
I mean, I feel like the brake rotor test is a rite of passage.
Yeah. She was mean. She was good, and we just ran her actually last. When was it? It was when Ariana graduated, because Jim Wade came and ran her with Garrett.
Yeah.
Husband, and she ran like a dream then too. But I think she liked Jim.
Who doesn't?
So and then let's see, in 2012, I had to run an iron pour at UW Whitewater, and then I had to do it like every year since then until the pandemic came. And so we were doing, I invited very few people because I was so scared and nervous, but
yeah, I don't blame you.
Kate Sanderib always came and helped me, and she was amazing, and she taught me so much too. I mean, like I she pushed me, by getting me to help build that cupola. Ended up building my own cupola later with some students from UW Oshkosh, I guess that must have been about 2012, because that was about the end of my time there, 2011, 2012. It was after, maybe it was like 20, I don't know. My timeline's all messed up. But Andy Light came and built the wind box for it.
Yeah.
And I worked on that with some of my students from UW Oshkosh. So that's how I know it was before 2012, because they were Oshkosh students. And so I had this little portable cupola that I could take around too, because I didn't really know how to run Dan's furnace, because I had run furnaces, since the one that I built with Danny Matheson, I had only run furnaces with wind boxes after that one. That was the only one that I built and helped with. I didn't have a wind box. And so I couldn't remember how that, like I was like, I can run one without a wind box. But Dan McGuire's cupolas never had wind boxes. Like he never put wind boxes on them. So I was nervous about running that. So I built one so I could bring it, and or I ended up bringing it and doing iron pours at Whitewater, mostly with that little furnace.
Yeah, furnace without a wind box makes me nervous. I don't know if I've ever, I don't want to say something and then have to like put my foot in my mouth, but I don't know if I've ever seen a furnace without a wind box.
That was like, yeah, that's what I started on. Like,
that's so wild to me.
1998. And it was weird to me to like, I don't know, what do you do with this wind box? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I'd only built that one with Danny and worked with, Dan McGuire on his wind boxless cupolas. And then I think it was Andy Light that was like, no, you just put a wind box on this.
Just put a wind box on it.
He's like, I'll make it. Yeah. And like Walter Early was out there. This was at my studio. They came out to my studio in Chilton, Wisconsin to do this, of course, at the invitation of Kate, because she knew all those guys so well.
Yeah.
So I actually just gave that furnace. We called that one R2V2 because it was like RV's little kid or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I melted the liner out of that one. I tried to do this homemade liner, and I melted it out. But that's been a fun thing. Like just try, like it's been fun to try stuff like that. Like I'll try to make my own refractory and see like what it can, how hot of temperatures it can hold up to. And I melted it all out. And then like, I figured out that you can, like I had all this old like kale wool and little bits of it. And I keep it because I'm such a hoarder. And I keep it.
Well, you never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I had like a bunch of like colloidal silica that was getting like, I couldn't use it for shell anymore. It was getting too thick. And so I was like, maybe I can just like kind of like dip this in here and line ladles with it, And so I was like, this is amazing. They're so much lighter.
Yeah.
So, like, I got all excited and I was like, this is why I love teaching. Like one, when I see my students learning, like that's the most rewarding thing. But two, when I learn something, the first thing I want to do is be like, look at what you can do. You could like, I want to share it, and I think that's like really key to being a teacher. Like, I've known teachers who are like real secretive about their stuff. I'm like, why are you teaching? But like I always want to share it. So then like when SLUS 2013 or 2015, 2017, I don't remember. I think it was the last one I was at. So maybe it was 2019. Okay. I got together with Toby Flores because he had been making ceramic shell lined ladles.
Right. Well, I was going to bring it up, but then I didn't want to be like, Toby Flores does that too. Like I just, that was the first time I ever saw a ladle like that. Because I don't even think I had seen a fiber ladle until after I graduated. I'm not sure. It doesn't even really matter though, but I went, so the Western in 2012 was at Fort Hays, Kansas. Toby and his students hosted it. And so I remember seeing their ladles with the like slurry soaked. I've never asked him about it. But I remember thinking, well, that's really smart, because as a, woman, like with limited upper body strength, just like biologically, like there's nothing wrong with me. That's just all I got. The heavy ladles at the University of Georgia were a bear, but you stick it out and it's, you run with the big dogs or whatever. And they did have a bull ladle too. So I'd be on the bull ladle, which had a jib crane and stuff with the hoist. So like I'd be on that. Like I never felt marginalized, but seeing those homemade like lighter
Yeah.
ladles, I was like, this guy. So it's like, so you, I mean, so you figured it out also completely independent of him.
Yeah, yeah. And I was really
So it's like,
excited. So I came home and I told Garrett, and I was like, listen to this. Like, this is what we can do with this old fiber frax and this like almost dead colloidal silica. Like it wasn't even, I didn't mix it, it wasn't even slurry. It was just colloidal silica. I was like,
yeah,
put this together and jam it in a ladle and it's really light. And he was like, you should talk to Toby Flores. And I was like, what? so,
but that just shows you like it's just proof. Two people completely unknowing can think of like very similar solutions to a problem, like a kind of universal problem in the community, because there is limitations to what different people, just to make it more accessible. And I always love it when stuff like that happens. It's like, you thought of that, I thought of that. Like it's so cool and also like inspiring.
it is. And I contacted Toby and I said, hey, do you want to do like a thing at Sloss? And so we did like a little demonstration thing, and he talked about how he did his ladles, and I talked about how I did my ladles, and they were a little bit different. But I was like, yeah, this is like waste material. Otherwise, like I would have had to throw this colloidal silica away, and all this kale wool, like I like it, just keep all your little schnibbly bits and, like hold on to them, put them in a box. And like, when you have enough of them, line your ladles.
Yeah.
Then I was actually I've been trying to use like clay and dip the fiber frax in clay and line a ladle like that. And I was actually working with Alyssa a little bit on that. And then she used them at her pour, and one of them ended up like burning through it. And I was like, oh, I think I need to work on that a little bit more. But I quickly relined it, and things went on and it all worked out. But it was a little bit of a panic there, and I was a little embarrassed. But I think there's something there though. Like maybe even just like if you don't have, because colloidal silica is expensive and you don't want to waste it. I just happen to not be able to get through it all. And but if you don't have that, then I'm hoping like maybe clay with fiber frax, you can like drench it in. I think I just didn't have it soaked through enough maybe, but yeah, maybe like making it a little finer and like mixing it in and then lining the ladle, still get really lightweight, but really strong.
Yeah. And probably also less expensive than the fiber ladles,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because that is an expense that I'm going to say it. Fiber ladles are kind of a luxury, and they weren't always around. So it's a newer kind of thing, but it also kind of, now I just run this podcast. I don't run a foundry, but from the limited experience that I've had, I feel like sometimes like once a fiber ladle is done, it's toast.
It is. It's true.
And so either techniques could be discovered to how to repair, but it's kind of like I've always found, if you're running with a fiber ladle, have another fiber ladle just in case you get a leaker, because you can't only have one ladle and then have it, even just knocking it accidentally wrong on something could punch it in. So they're delicate in not like the best way.
Yeah.
So these other and to be able to create something that's very useful out of something you would have had to, that was essentially waste, is really, so yeah, it's expensive, but if there's already a program that's having trouble, that has that material having trouble running through it, it's like it could be utilized in a different way. Yeah. Or given to another program that maybe could use it in that way.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah, it's just really fun. It's really fun.
I mean, there is something about iron casting and iron mold making that I feel like incites a lot of experimentation, because it's, if you know what to expect, it's not as exciting, maybe. I mean, I think it depends on the artist. It depends on what they're trying to say through their iron artwork. But I definitely have my own little tweaks of experimentation. And I'm like, but what if I, do this in this mold, and then I'll just tweak a little bit and just see how the variables, kind of come out. It's,
Yeah.
and I see and I hear other people in the community doing that as well. And it's super, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah. The last time I did this, I changed this aspect and it resulted in this. So there's this universal kind of like learning that happens, especially at conferences and places where you can really mix, techniques and learn from each other. And
Yeah.
so do you want to talk about what's hot on the horizon for you? Or is there something that we missed that you want to circle back to?
No, I think that about covers it. I mean, the last 10 years, I've been at UW Whitewater trying to fill some big shoes that, that I'll probably never fill, but doing my best.
Well, you know what though? Here's the thing, like you got shoes of your own. And
Thank you.
before this interview, I had never met you, but just from hearing your story, it sounds like your shoes are just as big, just different,
Thank you.
you know? So maybe don't worry about filling shoes as much, because that's another thing is it's like we can never fill another person's shoes, but we all individually bring our own benefits to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky because I'm still working with Dan McGuire. He's got a big property and he's working on a studio out there that's completely accessible. And at the last SLUS that was virtual, he and I did a sort of presentation on an accessible foundry, for people with limited abilities. And it was really fun to, like get in a kind of a deeper conversation with Andrew Marsh there because, he has been doing that for years. And of course that makes sense. I didn't realize it, so that was really fun. And so he and I are still working on that, Dan and I. And so that's something that's in the works, that's hot on the horizon. He wants to have a pour out there with all, like the hardest job is going to be like sorting the iron and sorting the coke and like weighing it up. And that's like the hardest job. And I was like, I love that because he's got, something to break the iron, like a hydraulic thing. He's got like conveyor belts to bring stuff, like, and then like it brings it up to the cupola and like you just drop it in, there's no like heavy lifting or anything. And so that is really exciting because I get to work with this amazing inventor, and I'm excited to have like Andrew come out and kind of like brainstorm, with Dan and me. And like, I think that would be an amazing thing to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also, so as I'm doing these interviews, accessibility has been coming up a lot. And I think that it's really important. I don't think that it's just another buzzword. Like we're all trying to figure out how we can grow our community and, make it accessible to people that maybe are of smaller build or maybe have disabilities. But also a lot of people that I've been interviewing, their advice, which we'll get to in a minute, but their advice is take care of your body, lift with your legs, use correct form when you're on a ladle, use a lift when you can, use machinery to help you just keep the taxing on your body less if you can. And I have so many people that are saying, yeah, I got to get my back fixed, or I had a back injury and then I had to have surgery and stuff. And so I feel like this accessibility also can benefit people that we would consider able-bodied.
Yeah, for sure.
As well, because we all only have one meat suit. We only have one body that is our temple, and so especially as an art handler, I have to be exposed to lifting a lot of things. And I was trained, even if you can lift something independently, just ask somebody else to help and lift it as a team of two, even if it seems stupid, because you'll be that much less tired. You'll be that much less fatigued and you're also you're like less likely to hurt yourself. And so I think that the accessibility is important, but it's also like can benefit so much more of it can benefit everybody really. So.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That was actually going to be my advice. So
Oh, okay. Well,
I have
but
other
let's
advice.
but let's hear it from from your brain, from how you formulate your, how do you say, what is your advice for the community and for students and anybody listening?
I see a lot of young women get um, into this field, and or at least sample it in school. And so I think, like I'm always emphasizing being careful, looking out for yourself, looking out for each other, and drinking a lot of water. And that's something that I have to practice myself too. Staying hydrated, I think, is probably one of the hardest things to do when you're pouring metal.
Mhm.
But also, it's just, like, as as someone who grew up trying to prove themselves, I just like, I'm like, oh gosh, don't worry about it. Like, you don't need to prove yourself. Like, we're all in this together. Like, we all just
Yeah.
need to help each other out. We're a team. No one needs to stand out as the toughest, or we're a team, and everybody's important. You know, um, the other advice I would give is to read read what Pam Brown wrote. She's a book. Read what Stacey Holloway wrote. Read, just like, read read about casting, and read about the experiences. And I think it's just so neat. And listen to this podcast, because this is the stuff, like, this is where you learn it. And it's so amazing and so interesting.
Everybody that's listening, we know that Tree knows she's preaching to the choir. You are listening, and we appreciate your listening, and but I'm also honored to be in that same category that you recommend. So yeah, it's thank you for that little plug. I appreciate it.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that my interest in our history as like the cast iron art community has always been there, but just recently, especially with a couple of kind of unfortunate losses in the community, it really triggered me to, you know, to action, basically, to, oh my gosh, we gotta so yeah, this is just kind of my like stab at trying to like capture what we can while we have everybody that's still here. So
It's really, really cool. It's really amazing. And I think yeah, I'm so glad you're doing it.
thank you. And I'm really glad that you were like open to this interview, even though you didn't know me, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person now. And I'm wondering if, so we must have had some crossover
I'm sure.
at SLOS, but I was really busy. In 2019, if you were at 2019, then we definitely had, but I think I'm finding that more and more is that there's people that were there, but I was just so focused
Yeah.
on my duties for the steering committee that uh, I missed a lot. I missed a lot of connections. And so I'm really sorry.
Oh no,
But
I mean, yeah, no, please. There's so many people there. There's so many people that I still don't know that I'm looking forward to meeting. I mean, I've met so many people through Garrett because he has been in the iron casting community for so long. Like, he helped build sculpture trails. So like, he was in at UK, with as a graduate student when Jerry Massey was teaching there, and Jim Wade there, and Andy Light was an undergrad there, at the time. And so it was like, I mean, like, I met so many people through Garrett that it would have taken me so much longer to meet. And I'm shy too. So like, without those introductions, I mean, I don't know. I would probably just be like that person over there in the corner. Although Kate would have probably, she brought me out, but
I think it's time we're going to go over to the after show. And do you have a topic or a story or a question in mind that you want to kind of spill some details?
yes, let's see. There was what's your favorite iron pour or memory from an iron pour? I had to say that when I
wait, did you spoil it? Right. So just tease it because we're not officially in the after show yet. So these people are still listening.
Oh,
that happens more often than not, Bill, because so can you just give us, so you're going to just talk about your favorite iron pour?
I'm going to talk about my favorite memory of an iron pour.
Okay. And I'm excited.
Scared and most excited.
When you've been the most, can you repeat that? I talked over you for a second.
When I was the most scared and the most excited.
Oh my gosh. These are my favorite types of stories because there's something about that, like fear and excitement. And also I see you look fine. You're still alive. So it couldn't have gone that bad for what you were scared for. So I'm excited. I'm happy I get to hear it in like 5 minutes time. But so for everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Tree, thank you for letting me interview you during this episode. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
And I'm glad I still get to talk to you for like another 15 to 20 minutes. So everybody else, thanks so much. And we'll see you later. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm very honored that Tree let me interview her for this podcast, and I hope that you enjoyed her stories as much as I did. So many life lessons are exemplified by her experiences, and personally, I learned a lot from her about iron and art during this conversation. Tree, thank you for continuing to carry the torch of your predecessors. I am sure that they are proud of your many accomplishments. Also, the way that you are spreading knowledge of iron casting to your students is vital to the growth of our community. So thank you for taking all of those many risks and persevering through all the challenges that you have faced over these years. Building furnaces, hosting iron pours, and bringing students all the way down to the national conference hosted in Birmingham, Alabama by Sloss Metal Arts. The faint of heart may have been deterred, but you were not. So many of us have benefited from your gifts. If you want more information about Tree or are interested in seeing images of her sculptures, visit her website, cowyardstudio.com. One last loving shout out of thanks to our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, as well as our other supporters on Patreon. The funds that they support me with are invaluable and help me stay invested in producing these episodes. If you would like access to the after shows for as little as $1 a month, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. You can choose what contribution level fits within your budget, but supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. And by now you already probably know that that's an extra 15 to 20 minutes with the show's guest, where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story. But if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast Iron on Patreon, that's okay. Instead, if you could just share the podcast with someone you think would be interested in listening or watching, I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you happen to be watching the show on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the Podcast Iron channel. This way, you can set up notifications for when each episode goes live. But also, I'm working towards 100 subscribers, and reaching that milestone will allow me to change the channel URL from a random assortment of numbers and letters that I've just been assigned, to change it to something more personal. And I would love to have the YouTube website for the channel be youtube.com/podcastiron. So for those of you who have subscribed, thank you for helping me make this dream a reality. Lastly, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Let me say, folks, if you have someone special in the community that you would like to hear me interview, then please do reach out. This episode is a perfect example, and thank you so much to John Paulus of Center Ground Studio for contacting me and recommending that I interview Tree. Now, most likely the person that you have in mind is on my list of people that I want to chat with, but If you reach out to me, your recommendation will help me move them to the top of the list. So thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day. Just the cost of staying hydrated, I guess.